You keep telling yourself this is growth. You speak in terms like holding space, setting boundaries, emotional labor. You've mastered the vocabulary. You know the scripts. You've memorized the symptoms, the attachment styles, the trauma responses. You diagnose yourself with a fluent precision that borders on obsession. And when you say you're working on yourself, what you really mean is you're learning how to protect your ego more effectively. But are you actually becoming a better person? Or just a more efficient one? More sterile, more untouchable, more self-centered? This is the irony no one wants to talk about, that sometimes healing makes you harder, that therapy, this sacred thing that's meant to make you whole, can also subtly, methodically teach you how to shrink the world down to the size of your own pain. It starts with something simple. A session, a conversation, a book. You're introduced to the idea that your feelings matter, that you've been conditioned to neglect yourself, that you're allowed to say no, and it feels like salvation. For the first time, your suffering is taken seriously. You're not being dramatic. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're a product of things you didn't choose, a system, a family, a culture. You feel understood, maybe for the first time, but then something shifts. The healing becomes the identity. The boundaries become weapons. You stop asking, what's my role in this dynamic, and start assuming that anyone who triggers you is toxic, that anyone who disagrees is abusive, that anyone who needs something from you is violating your peace. You start cutting people off, you call it self-care. You stop compromising, you call it empowerment. You demand space, silence, validation, unconditionally, you call it emotional safety. And slowly, you begin to orbit around your wounds like planets around a dying star. But Nietzsche warned about this. He saw that when people don't know how to transform their suffering, they weaponize it. They start seeing the world not as it is, but as a theater for their unresolved pain. You've mistaken freedom for isolation, healing for avoidance, strength for selfishness. Because true healing doesn't look like walking away from everyone who challenges you. It looks like staying in the tension, sitting in discomfort, owning your part in the chaos. You weren't meant to become invincible. You were meant to become human. And humans need connection more than control. Think about the last time you truly connected with someone. Was it because they validated every feeling you had? Or was it because they saw you? Even when you were wrong, even when you were flawed, even when you were hard to love. Therapy today has turned into a machine that endlessly reflects your own pain back to you. But mirrors don't heal. Mirrors only show. Real growth happens in the friction of relationship, in that raw space where your trauma collides with someone else's and neither of you walks away, where you don't get to craft a perfect version of yourself, where you're interrupted, misunderstood, forced to choose compassion over correctness. But the more you rely on therapy to make you better, the more you avoid those moments, the more you seek sterile spaces, echo chambers, people who tiptoe around your triggers, and then you wonder why you feel alone, because you've mistaken safety for sterility. Intimacy is messy. It involves conflict, discomfort, accountability, and therapy, when used wrong, sterilizes all of that. It teaches you how to curate your interactions so that no one gets too close, so that no one gets to hurt you again. But that also means no one gets to truly love you either. There's a quiet kind of arrogance in the way we talk about healing now, as if we are owed love, affection, empathy just because we've suffered. As if pain automatically makes us profound, as if our scars are sacred and therefore unquestionable. But being hurt doesn't make you right. It just makes you human. And humans hurt each other. Even the good ones, especially the good ones. You want people to love you unconditionally, but do you love anyone that way? Or is your love a checklist? Do they make you feel seen? Do they support your goals? Do they communicate like a therapist? Do they never trigger you? That's not love, that's a contract. And no one, not your parents, not your partner, not your friends, can fulfill that. Because love is inconvenient, it's asymmetrical, it asks for things when you least want to give, it breaks you in places therapy can't fix. Feel love doesn't always feel good. But it's in those difficult, uncomfortable places where your rough edges are worn down, not by introspection, but by contact. You don't learn empathy by analyzing it. You learn it by watching someone cry and choosing not to retreat. You learn it when you hear something that hurts your pride and choose not to react defensively. You learn it by staying when leaving would have felt more empowering. That's the contradiction therapy doesn't always teach you. That growth often comes from staying, not always, not in abusive situations, but in normal, difficult, frustrating, loving relationships, the ones that trigger your deepest insecurities, not because they're toxic, but because they matter. You can't meditate your way out of needing people. You can't journal your way into connection. You can't boundary your way into intimacy. You want to be understood, but have you tried understanding? You want to be held, but have you held anyone lately? You want deep, nourishing relationships, but are you willing to be inconvenient, to be wrong, to be hurt? Because here's the truth. Therapy can make you more self-aware, but self-awareness isn't the same as selflessness. It's not even the same as growth. Some of the most self-aware people are also the most manipulative. They just know exactly what to say, exactly how to frame things, exactly how to avoid accountability while sounding enlightened. You probably know someone like that. Maybe you've become someone like that. Person who uses their trauma as a shield, who never apologizes, only explains, who thinks that because they're healing, they can't be harming. But Nietzsche would say, that's the ultimate form of self-deception. To think your pain makes you exempt from the moral consequences of your actions. And it doesn't. You can be healing and still hurting people. You can be in therapy and still be selfish. You can speak the language of growth while avoiding every opportunity to actually grow. You can spend years dissecting your past and still be blind to how you're repeating it on other people. The question isn't whether therapy is helpful. Of course, it can be. The question is, what are you using it for? To become more honest or more polished? To face your patterns? Or to justify them? To learn how to love or how to protect yourself from love? Because there's a difference. And if you're not careful, you'll wake up one day surrounded by perfectly managed relationships and feel an emptiness you can't name. You'll have boundaries, clarity, language, and no one to call when you're scared. You'll have safety, but no intimacy. You'll have self-respect, but no softness. You'll have healing, but no connection. Because you forgot that being healed isn't the goal, being whole is. And wholeness doesn't come from avoidance. It comes from risking yourself again and again for the sake of something bigger than your pain. Maybe that's love, maybe that's friendship, maybe that's your child, or a community, or a calling. But it's always something that requires you to give, not just protect, to stay, not just leave, to forgive, not just understand. And that's the therapy no one can do for you. That's the healing that only happens when you stop making everything about you and start showing up for others. Even when it's inconvenient, especially when it's inconvenient, because that's when you find out who you really are, not in the quiet of your therapist's office, but in the noise of life, the mess of love, the sacred chaos of being human. And maybe that's the only healing that ever really mattered.